Fort Bragg's morning was unforgiving. A biting wind cut through the rows of neatly trimmed hedges and concrete walkways, rustling the crisp autumn leaves that scattered across the compound. Specialist Jack Rourke, 28, rugged and cocky, stormed through the hallways of the Special Operations Training Complex. His boots clanged against the steel grates, echoing down the long corridor like a warning drumbeat. Today was another briefing, another abrupt order interrupting his plans to decompress after a grueling week of drills. Rumors of a new mission buzzed through the ranks like bees trapped in a jar, but the details were scarce. Jack was in a hurry. His mind was elsewhere, replaying the firefight from last week during the urban assault simulation, his frustration at being outpaced, outmaneuvered, yet still being forced to take orders from some desk-bound officer. The briefing wasn't going to make him feel any better. He rounded a corner too fast, his anger carrying momentum like a battering ram. And then he collided. A woman, smaller in stature, slender but undeniably strong, stood her ground without flinching. Jack's hand reached out to shove her aside, instinct over judgment, the irritation in him bubbling over. "Move," he grunted. His shoulder bumped into hers. She didn't budge. Jack froze mid-push. Something about her stance, her calm but piercing gaze, stopped him. He blinked, suddenly aware of the weight in the room, though it was empty but for the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Her eyes weren't just sharp, they were unrelenting, measuring, evaluating. "You want to try that again?" she asked, voice even, deliberate, unyielding. Jack opened his mouth to bark back, to assert himself, but the words faltered. He felt a prickling in his chest, a strange mix of unease and curiosity. She wasn't flinching. She wasn't intimidated. And yet there was something dangerous about her calm. Before he could respond, the PA system buzzed overhead, cutting through the tension like a gunshot. "All operators report to the briefing room. Your new commander has arrived." Jack's mouth opened slightly. His irritation was replaced by confusion, his adrenaline spiking. Everyone had been talking about a new commander, a high-ranking officer with experience, but he never expected her. He turned to move past her, muttering, "Just what we need. Another desk jockey to lecture us about procedures." But when the briefing room doors swung open, the world seemed to pause. Every operator in the room froze mid-step. Jack himself felt the blood drain from his face. She stepped in, boots echoing softly against the polished floor, posture perfect, gaze unwavering. Jack watched, disbelief etched into his features. And when she faced them, the air shifted. She wasn't just an officer in a uniform. She radiated authority. Her presence commanded attention without a word. "I am Commander Elena Price," she announced, her voice cutting through the murmur like steel. "Effective immediately, I am your new leader of Alpha Group." Jack's heart skipped. He had spent years in this unit, working under men who led with brawn or ego, not with the quiet, unshakable precision this woman projected. His hand flexed unconsciously at his side, jaw tight. Her eyes scanned the room with surgical precision, finally landing on Jack. It was subtle but unmistakable, a look that stripped away bravado, assessing not just him, but the space between his confidence and his arrogance. "Some of you and I," she said, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing at the corner of her lips, already started off poorly. The implication hung in the air. Jack's stomach twisted. The shove, the confrontation, all of it. He had just realized he might have started off exactly how she wanted him to, wrong, cocky, vulnerable. Captain Doyle, Alpha Group's second-in-command, cleared his throat, trying to regain composure. He had decades of experience, seen countless officers come and go, but he, too, felt the tension in the air tighten like a drawn bowstring. Commander Price moved to the projector, the screen illuminating the otherwise dim room. Satellite images flickered, displaying a compound nestled in jagged, snow-dusted mountains. Her voice was calm, each word deliberate. "You are going to extract a U.S. intelligence asset," she said. "Alive, in 72 hours." Jack leaned forward instinctively, trying to catch every detail, every anomaly in the images. His mind raced the terrain, the hostile border, the near-impossible time frame. His gut tightened. She turned, scanning the room with eyes that seemed to see not just each operator, but each weakness. Then she rested her gaze on Jack again. "Specialist Rourke, you will be on point." The room seemed to shrink. Every whisper, every breath, every heartbeat intensified. Jack felt exposed, his pride and skill under a magnifying glass. He wanted to protest. He wanted to remind her he had field experience, tactical knowledge, battle scars, but something in her expression stopped him. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pride. It was something far more commanding. It was quiet power. And then she added, "This mission leaves no room for mistakes, no room for hesitation, and no room for ego." Her eyes bored into him, steady as a rifle sight. Jack swallowed hard. Every nerve in his body screamed both defiance and caution. He had always relied on instinct, speed, and audacity. He had never faced someone who seemed to anticipate his every move before it happened. The murmurs of the team faded to nothing. The weight of the mission pressed on them, but more than that, the weight of her presence pressed on Jack. She wasn't just a new commander. She was a storm waiting to hit, a test he had not seen coming, a force that would push him and everyone around him, beyond anything they thought they could endure. And as she ended the briefing, her eyes locking on his one more time, Jack realized the shove, the confrontation, the arrogance, they were not trivial. They were the first step into something he couldn't yet understand, something dangerous, something that would demand every ounce of his skill, his patience, and his pride. He had no idea what he had just gotten himself into. The room emptied. Operators dispersed, but Jack lingered, staring at Commander Alina Price as she moved with quiet authority, gathering maps and files. He wanted to speak, to apologize, to challenge her, to understand. But he stayed silent, because he had learned, even in these first few minutes, that this woman was unlike anyone he had ever met. And whatever came next, whatever hell they were about to face, he knew one thing with absolute certainty: he would never underestimate her again. The wind howled outside the compound, rattling windows, shaking the floorboards. Jack's reflection in the glass stared back at him, tension written in every line of his face. And somewhere deep inside, the first flicker of respect and fear began to take root. The storm had arrived, and it was female. And Jack had just been warned. The morning light had barely begun to creep over Fort Bragg when Alpha Group gathered for the first full briefing under Commander Alina Price. The room smelled faintly of coffee and gun oil, a mixture that never failed to sharpen senses. But today, even that familiar aroma couldn't mask the electric tension crackling in the air. Jack Rourke arrived late, boots scuffing the floor, head still spinning from the collision with Alina the day before. He wanted to show he was unfazed, that he didn't need her approval, but the second he entered the room, all eyes seemed to pivot. Commander Price stood at the front, boots planted firmly, shoulders squared like steel girders. Her small frame belied the presence she carried. She didn't need to shout to command attention. The air simply bent around her authority. Jack froze for a moment, caught off guard. The day after their first encounter, he realized she had already done what no other commander had ever managed. She had unbalanced him with nothing but her posture, her gaze, her calm. "Sit," she said, her voice even, measured. Not harsh, not nurturing, just decisive. Jack slid into a seat at the back, keeping his gaze on her. Every man in the room, battle-hardened veterans, did the same. There was no muttering, no joking, no whispering, only silence. Alina began the briefing without preamble. "I wasn't assigned to Alpha Group to make friends," she said. "I was sent here because your next mission requires precision, focus, and zero weakness." Jack felt a flicker of irritation. Those words sounded rehearsed military boilerplate meant to inspire compliance. But something about the way she spoke, her eyes scanning the room, assessing each operator like a predator evaluating prey, made him reconsider. This wasn't rhetoric. This was warning. She clicked a button on the remote. Satellite images of a compound appeared on the projector screen. Nestled in the jagged Carpathian Mountains, the location looked like a nightmare in stone and ice. Jack leaned forward instinctively, recognizing the signs of a high-risk extraction. "You are tasked with extracting a U.S. intelligence asset," Alina continued. "Alive. You have 72 hours." The operator's eyes narrowed. The window was nearly impossible, and Jack knew better than most that her words weren't hyperbole. Alina's gaze moved deliberately across the room, resting on Jack. The weight of that look made him shift in his chair. "Specialist work, you will be on point." He froze. Every instinct in his body told him to protest. He'd handled countless operations in hostile territory, led teams through ambushes and firefights, but the tone in her voice was an unspoken challenge. "Are you ready to lead, or are you just another ego waiting to fail?" Captain Doyle, usually unshakable, cleared his throat. "Commander, the terrain is complex. The weather is." "I'm aware," Alina interrupted smoothly. "You'll operate under standard protocols for alpine extractions. Deviate, and the consequences are yours alone." Her eyes flicked back to Jack. "I want operators who can follow orders precisely while maintaining initiative. That includes you, specialist." Jack's jaw tightened. He had always prided himself on thinking on his feet, bending rules when necessary, pushing boundaries. But her words didn't feel like rules. They felt like a gauntlet. Then came the part that unsettled him most, the silence she carried between her words. There were no unnecessary gestures, no flashy displays of rank or medals, no ego-driven monologues about past heroics, only presence. And yet every detail, the way she adjusted her gloves, the subtle arch of her brow, the faint crease of her uniform, spoke volumes. Whispers began to circulate among the men, rumors, barely audible, about her past operations. Delta Force. Black Operations. Survivor of a failed mission that cost an entire unit. No one dared ask her directly. No one even dared to stare too long. Commander Price was untouchable in ways that intimidated even seasoned operators. And yet, Jack felt something more complicated stirring: curiosity, fear, respect, and most unnervingly the need to test himself against her. "Any questions?" she asked. Her voice sliced through the room again. Jack's hand twitched, but he kept it at his side. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. Finally, he said, "Ma'am, I've led men in situations worse than this. Why the personal involvement? Why Alpha Group?" Her gaze settled on him fully now, and the air between them seemed to hum. "Because this mission requires precision that only comes from experience, and because some mistakes are personal." Jack frowned. That wasn't an answer. But her eyes, calm and piercing, didn't waver. Something flickered in them, a trace of memory, a hint of pain, something unspoken. The briefing continued. She detailed enemy positions, patrol rotations, and the extraction routes. Each operator absorbed the data, but Jack noticed the subtle shifts in her approach. She wasn't just giving orders. She was studying them, measuring reactions, predicting weaknesses. He felt exposed, as if every decision he had ever made, every split-second choice in the field, was suddenly under a magnifying glass. When the briefing concluded, she didn't dismiss them outright. Instead, she paused, scanning the room like a hawk circling prey. "I want Alpha Group at the training grounds at 0700 hours tomorrow. We move fast, we move hard, and we leave nothing to chance. Fail me, and the cost isn't mine to bear. Remember that." Jack felt the words hit him like a cold wave. She wasn't bluffing. She wouldn't tolerate hesitation. And he had a sinking sense that failure here would mean more than just reprimands or paperwork. It could mean lives. As the operators filed out, Jack lingered behind, watching her gather maps, double-check gear, and organize intel with meticulous precision. He wanted to approach, to challenge, to understand, but he felt frozen. Finally, he muttered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else, "She's something else." One of his teammates, a veteran sniper named Ortiz, passed by. "You think she's tough? Wait till she puts you through the obstacle course tomorrow. You won't even know what hit you." Jack nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He replayed the collision in the hallway the day before. The shove, the arrogance, the sudden stop mid-push. And now the fact that she had just assigned him to lead the point on a nearly impossible mission. He realized with a mix of dread and grudging admiration that Commander Elena Price wasn't someone to underestimate. Not in the hallway, not in the briefing room, not on the battlefield. And as he stepped out into the crisp morning air, the wind tugging at his uniform, Jack felt the weight of something he couldn't yet name. Anticipation, fear, and the undeniable pull of respect. Whatever came next, whatever hell awaited them in the Carpathian Mountains, he knew one thing with absolute certainty: he would never look at her the same way again. The storm had arrived, and it was in the form of a woman who could command without raising her voice, who could intimidate without shouting, and who could see every weakness before it could be exploited. Jack clenched his fists, letting the cold wind clear his mind. Tomorrow, the real test would begin. But one thought burned brighter than fear or pride. He had just begun to understand what it meant to follow and what it would take to survive. And deep down, he knew one undeniable truth. This was only the beginning of something far bigger than either of them could imagine. The sun had barely risen over Fort Bragg, the sky painted in pale hues of orange and gray, when Alpha Group assembled on the sprawling training grounds. The autumn chill nipped at exposed skin, biting and sharp, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and gun oil. Today's session wasn't just another routine drill. It was the first test under Commander Elena Price, and the team could feel the tension buzzing like electricity in the air. Jack Rourke arrived with a deliberate swagger, determined to project confidence. His boots struck the asphalt with rhythm, his mind cycling through past training exercises, recalling the grueling endurance runs, the obstacle courses, the urban assault simulations. He had survived all of them, often leading, sometimes barely keeping up, but he had never faced someone like her. Elena Price appeared quietly at the far end of the field, adjusting her tactical gloves with meticulous precision. She didn't need a team of aides or a ceremonial entrance. Her presence alone drew every eye. Jack felt his stomach tighten. She didn't shout, she didn't signal, she just existed, and the world seemed to bend around her authority. "All right, Alpha Group," she said, her voice cutting through the morning air. Calm, firm, unequivocal. "Today isn't about speed, it isn't about strength, it's about trust. I need to know I can count on you to execute without hesitation. And Specialist Rourke, I need to know you can follow instructions while leading. Any mistakes, any hesitation could be the difference between life and death." Jack's chest tightened at the mention of his name. He wanted to retort, to assert that he had done worse and survived, but the calm precision in her voice made him hesitate. The first obstacle was deceptively simple, a rope wall 15 feet high. Operators sprinted to the base, sizing it up. Jack charged forward, confident he could reach the top first. He planted his boot, grabbed the rope, and froze. Elena Price had already scaled halfway up with a fluidity that defied belief. Jack's muscles tensed as she reached the top and swung down onto the platform. No hesitation, no grunt, no wasted motion. It wasn't just skill, it was precision honed over years of real combat, years of life-and-death decisions. He gritted his teeth, ascending quickly. But every time he thought he'd gained ground, she was there first. Not waiting, not mocking, just moving, unstoppable, untouchable, efficient. Next was the barbed wire crawl. Operators flattened themselves to the ground, scraping against the dirt and steel, careful not to catch the wires that could shred skin. Jack lunged forward, expecting to outpace the others, only to hear Alina's soft, controlled breath near his ear. "Relax, move with purpose, not speed," she said, her eyes scanning the ground with meticulous care. "Haste kills." Her words hit harder than any rifle round. Jack felt the sting of shame. She wasn't just faster, she wasn't just stronger, she was smarter. Every move calculated, every motion intentional. He was suddenly painfully aware of how little control he truly had. The tire flip came next, a massive, oil-slicked vehicle tire, heavier than it seemed. Jack gritted his teeth and heaved, using every ounce of his strength. Alina approached, laid her hands on the tire and lifted it with a grunt that wasn't just muscle. It was memory, reflex, discipline honed in fire and combat. The team watched in awe. Jack's pride gnawed at him, but before he could recover, she signaled them forward. The final obstacle loomed, a suspended beam, 30 feet off the ground, demanding balance, concentration, and nerve. Jack lunged first, confident in his agility, but his boots slipped. Heart hammering, he felt himself tilt dangerously. A scream escaped his throat, caught halfway by panic. Then, unexpectedly, a hand gripped his vest. "Commander Price." Her grip was steel. Her calm voice grounded him. "Rurk, focus," she said. Jack froze. Not a single word, not a single gesture wasted. She held him steady, ensuring that one false move wouldn't send him plummeting. His muscles trembled with tension, not fear of falling, but awe. One wrong move here could cost them both, yet she stood unwavering. "You're not invincible," she murmured, her eyes scanning his face. "Stop pretending you are." Jack swallowed hard. He wanted to argue, to show he could handle it on his own, but the logic in her eyes was undeniable. There was no room for ego here, not when survival hung in the balance. The final stretch was a sprint to the extraction point, designed to simulate the adrenaline surge operators would feel in a real-world scenario. The team charged, boots pounding, lungs burning, adrenaline spiking. Alina led the way, every movement precise, calculated. Jack pushed forward beside her, trying to keep up, but for the first time he realized raw strength wasn't enough. Midway through, a distant alarm blared across the compound, the kind reserved for emergencies. Every operator froze for a heartbeat, hearts pounding. Commander Price's expression hardened. The calm precision vanished, replaced by the sharp, lethal focus of a soldier stepping into combat. "Move," she barked, no hesitation in her tone. "Situation escalation. All units, defensive posture immediately." Jack's adrenaline spiked. The training ground had just transformed into a simulation of chaos, unexpected, unplanned, realistic. He had been caught off guard. Others were shouting, scrambling, adjusting positions. But Alina moved like a shadow through the chaos, commanding positions, assigning cover, scanning the terrain, and keeping an eye on every operator. Jack followed, trying to process what he had just witnessed. She wasn't just training them, she was testing them under pressure. And not only that, she was testing him. Every shove, every act of arrogance, every misstep in his prideful routine had led him here, into a situation where every decision mattered. The alarm cleared, but the tension remained. The operators regrouped, their breathing heavy, muscles trembling, adrenaline still coursing. Jack stood beside Commander Price, watching her take in the aftermath, noting every detail. He felt a creeping realization. She wasn't just in charge, she earned every inch of authority. And if he wanted to survive this mission, he would have to follow her completely, even when it challenged every instinct he had ever relied upon. Then the faintest smirk touched her lips, barely noticeable, but enough to unsettle Jack. "This is only the beginning," she said softly. "If you thought today was hard, wait until you see the field." Jack swallowed, feeling the first real twinge of fear, but beneath it something else stirred: respect. And maybe, for the first time in his career, a flicker of admiration. He looked at her closely. This was a woman shaped by fire, forged in chaos, unafraid of danger and unshakable even when everything around her threatened to collapse. She wasn't just a commander. She was a storm, and he had just stepped into the eye. The team packed up, but Jack lingered, his mind racing. The collision in the hallway, the briefing room, the obstacle course, each encounter had stripped layers off his ego. He realized he had misjudged her. He had underestimated not only her strength but her resolve, her precision, and the sheer force of will that radiated from her. And deep down, he knew one thing. Tomorrow, when the real mission began, there would be no room for mistakes, for hesitation, or for ego. Every move would matter. Every decision could cost lives. And this commander, this enigmatic, relentless force of nature, would be watching, testing, and challenging him every step of the way. Jack exhaled slowly, the crisp morning air filling his lungs. His reflection in the nearby glass building stared back at him, tension written in every line of his face, pride and frustration mingling with the first real taste of respect. The storm had arrived, and it was walking, talking, and moving with lethal grace right beside him. Tomorrow, the real test would begin, and Jack Rourke realized, with a growing sense of unease and anticipation, that surviving it might not just mean following orders. It might mean learning to trust Commander Alina Price with his life. And even that thought left him uneasy. By mid-morning, the crisp chill of Fort Bragg had given way to a low, humid tension. The team had been briefed, trained, and drilled under Commander Alina Price, yet the energy in the compound was unlike anything Jack Rourke had ever experienced. Something had shifted, the obstacle courses, the briefings, even the drills now felt like preludes to something far more dangerous. Jack followed Alina across the compound toward the operations center. The building loomed ahead, glass and steel reflecting the muted autumn sun. Inside, the scent of electronics, coffee, and urgency created a suffocating intensity. Analysts and aides scurried about, papers and tablets in hand, eyes glued to screens streaming maps, satellite feeds, and incoming intel. Alina walked in without hesitation. No pause, no ceremony, just authority. Her boots clicked against the floor, each step precise, deliberate, a silent drumbeat of control. Operators instinctively fell in behind her, Jack included, feeling the strange pull of obedience that her presence commanded. Inside the ops center, the hum of activity was abruptly pierced by whispers of alarm. Screens flashed red, and a tense murmur ran through the room like an undercurrent. Jack watched Alina carefully, noting how she didn't flinch, didn't panic, but absorbed every piece of information with surgical focus. An aide approached, almost hesitating as he extended a tablet. "Commander Price, this just came in," the aide said, his voice tight with urgency. Alina took the device with one hand, eyes scanning the data with rapid precision. Her brow creased slightly, a subtle but unmistakable tension threading across her usually composed features. Jack felt a pit form in his stomach, the first real sign that this mission, already high stakes, had just become intensely personal. The tablet displayed a grainy, handheld video. A man, bound and bloodied, lay on the floor of a dimly lit room. Behind him stood a masked insurgent, the glint of a knife catching the light. A timer ticked down in the corner, a countdown to execution. Jack's stomach dropped. He recognized the uniform. This was U.S. intelligence personnel. But something was different about Alina's reaction. She didn't give orders immediately. She didn't shout at the team. Instead, she froze, her fingers tightening around the tablet, jaw clenching. Jack's curiosity got the better of him. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "Commander, who is he?" Alina didn't answer immediately. Her eyes stayed fixed on the screen, unblinking, the calm mask of a seasoned operator cracking just slightly. Her lips pressed together. Then, barely audible, she whispered, "He's my brother." The words hung in the room like a live wire. Jack's eyes widened. His heart pounded. A U.S. intelligence agent, hostage, life on the line, and Alina Price had a personal connection. That transformed everything. Her calm, her discipline, her unflinching authority, it was now layered with stakes that ran deeper than duty. Jack glanced around the room. The team had noticed the shift. Even Captain Doyle, with decades of battlefield experience, seemed caught off guard. For the first time, they weren't just facing a high-risk mission. They were witnessing a commander whose personal stakes were intertwined with operational success. Alina's voice finally cut through the tension, low and steady. "We move tonight." Jack's brow furrowed. "Commander, we need a plan. Extraction teams support recon." She turned her piercing gaze on him. "Rourke, if you're going to question my judgment, save it. Now is not the time for hesitation. We either act decisively or we lose him." He swallowed hard. He recognized the resolve in her eyes, a combination of fear, fury, and absolute determination. This wasn't a drill. This wasn't training. Every operator knew the consequence. Failure meant death. But for Alina, failure meant losing the only family she had left. The team sprang into action under her command. Alina's orders were precise, clear, and executed with deadly efficiency. Jack moved alongside her, adrenaline spiking, muscles coiled for action. The plan was fast and brutal. Satellite intel indicated the compound was heavily fortified, with multiple layers of security. Extraction would require infiltration under cover of darkness, neutralization of key threats, and precise timing. Alina's personal stakes became their driving force. Every movement, every calculation, carried the weight of saving her brother. Jack watched her coordinate team positions, check gear, and adjust the extraction plan in real time. She wasn't just a commander. She was a soldier who had stepped straight into personal hell and refused to yield. Jack's mind raced. He had always prided himself on clear-headed leadership under fire, but this was different. He had never seen someone channel grief, fear, and resolve into lethal efficiency so seamlessly. He felt exposed, both inspired and intimidated. As the team loaded into the tactical vehicles, Alina leaned close to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Rourke, I need you sharp. I need you on point. My brother's life depends on it." Jack swallowed, the enormity of the situation crashing down. He had led men into firefights before, but never under such intensely personal stakes. This mission wasn't just about skill or courage. It was about life, loyalty, and trust. And he was now fully aware that failure was not an option. The convoy rolled out, engines humming and tires crunching over gravel, cutting through the early morning mist. Jack caught glimpses of Alina scanning the horizon, eyes sharp, calculating. Every shadow, every movement, every slight detail seemed to register with her. Her calm composure masked a storm of determination that fueled the mission forward. Jack leaned over slightly. "Commander, what's the extraction plan if they move him?" Her gaze flicked to him, icy and controlled. "Then we adapt, we improvise, we don't leave anyone behind, especially him." Her words sent a shiver down Jack's spine, not because they were shocking, but because he recognized her meaning. Alina Price didn't just talk about commitment. She lived it, breathed it, carried it into the field. And now he was about to see just how far that resolve would take them. The convoy approached the staging point near the mountainous region. Satellite images had confirmed enemy patrols, sniper positions, and booby traps. Alina gave her final commands, each word crisp, precise, and lethal. Jack could see the team responding instinctively, not just because of protocol, but because of the trust her authority demanded. Jack took a deep breath, the cold air filling his lungs. His hands tightened on his weapon. He realized he was about to step into a mission that would test every skill he had. But more than that, he was stepping into a storm led by a commander who carried personal stakes heavier than anyone else on the field. As they approached the darkened ridges of the Carpathian Mountains, Jack couldn't shake one thought. Whatever came next, Alina Price would face it head-on, and the rest of them had no choice but to follow. And in that moment, he understood something he hadn't realized before. This mission was no longer just an operation. It was a crucible. And Commander Price's brother was the flame at its center. Jack's stomach churned. His mind raced. The adrenaline surged. He glanced at her in the driver's side of the tactical vehicle, her eyes forward, jaw set, body coiled for action. One thing was painfully clear. Nothing in his career had prepared him for what was about to happen. And as the convoy disappeared into the mist of the mountains, the faint, distant rumble of danger echoed through the valley, a warning that this mission, and everything it would demand, had already begun. The night was absolute, a deep, impenetrable black that swallowed every detail, broken only by the faint shimmer of starlight reflecting off frost-covered rocks. Alpha Group's convoy had halted at the staging area on the edge of the Carpathian ridges. Engines were cut, leaving only the whisper of wind through jagged peaks and the distant howl of a lone wolf echoing through the valley. Jack Rourke crouched in the shadow of a tactical vehicle, his breath fogging in the freezing air. He checked his weapon for the third time, each click of the magazine release echoing in the silence. Adrenaline and anticipation twisted in his gut. Every instinct screamed danger. Every movement, every whisper of the wind carried potential death. Commander Elena Price emerged from the darkness like a phantom, her black tactical suit blending perfectly with the shadows. She didn't speak. She never needed to. Her presence alone commanded focus, discipline, and respect. Every operator in Alpha Group instinctively aligned behind her, as if drawn by an invisible force. Jack caught her eyes for a fleeting moment. They were calm, yet laser-focused, burning with a personal intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. He couldn't help but feel a surge of both awe and fear. Elena Price was no longer just a commander. She was a storm, controlled, precise, and deadly. She signaled forward. The team moved, feet silent on the rocky terrain, every step calculated to avoid detection. Satellite images had revealed multiple enemy patrols, sniper nests, and booby traps guarding the intelligence asset. Every shadow could hide a threat. Every sound could be a gunshot waiting to happen. Jack led the point, his weapon scanning the darkness. Every instinct told him to push forward quickly, but Elena's voice cut through his head almost telepathically. "Patience, Rourke. Precision first. Speed comes second." He cursed under his breath. Always fast, always decisive, that had been his style. But following her meant recalibrating everything he thought he knew about command and tactics. The team approached the first enemy outpost, a cluster of dimly lit huts with patrols moving systematically around the perimeter. Elena paused, crouched low, and pointed to the shadows. Silent hand signals, subtle but unmistakable, conveyed the plan. Eliminate patrols quietly, move the perimeter, and avoid detection at all costs. Jack felt the tension coil in his shoulders. He'd been in hostile zones before, but never with stakes this personal. Elena's brother's life hung in the balance. Mistakes weren't just costly, they were deadly. The first patrol came into view. Jack's finger hovered on the trigger. Elena's hand subtly gestured hold. Wait, timing. The patrol moved within range, and with silent precision, Elena dispatched the first target. A single shot, clean and controlled. No struggle, no noise, just a body collapsing into the shadow. Jack's breath caught. That one movement, so simple yet flawless, was a lesson in lethal efficiency. He followed, moving through the terrain with newfound awareness. Every step was deliberate, every sound measured. The team cleared the first perimeter, advancing toward the compound where the hostage was held. As they moved, Elena whispered strategic adjustments, recalculating in real time based on patrol movements. Jack realized that she wasn't just commanding, she was predicting, anticipating, adapting faster than anyone he had ever seen. Then came the first sign of real danger. A patrol returned unexpectedly, moving closer than anticipated. One of Jack's teammates froze for a heartbeat too long. A gunshot rang out not from them but from the enemy. Chaos erupted. Elena reacted instantly. Her movements were fluid, precise. She neutralized the threat, giving Jack a hand signal to flank left. He moved, heart hammering, adrenaline spiking. Every second was life or death. The mountain terrain became a labyrinth, each shadow a potential enemy. Jack's mind raced. He had trained for this, lived for this, yet Alina's presence magnified every detail, every risk. Her brother's life was no longer a distant target, it was a tangible weight pressing down on him. Failure was not an option. They reached the inner perimeter of the compound. Satellite images had underestimated the enemy's fortifications, reinforced doors, motion sensors, and armed guards. Alina studied the layout in seconds, then turned to Jack. "Entry point," she whispered. "You lead, I cover, clear it silently. Watch the corners, trust your instincts, but follow the plan." Jack swallowed. The plan was simple yet lethal. He led the team to the reinforced door, manipulating the lock with practiced hands. The tension in the air was palpable. Outside, the wind howled through the mountains, masking their movements. Inside, the enemy awaited, unaware of the storm about to strike. The door clicked, they entered. Silence, darkness, then movement. A shadow lunged from the corner, a guard attempting to raise the alarm. Jack reacted instantly, neutralizing the threat without a sound. Alina's eyes scanned the room, calculating the next move. "Two more," she whispered. "Front corridor, cover me." Jack signaled his team, and they split, moving like shadows, eliminating threats with precision. The room grew smaller with each step, the tension heavier. Every heartbeat, every breath was measured, calculated. Finally, they reached the inner room, the hostage. Alina's brother lay tied to a chair, bloodied but alive. The insurgent leader stood over him, knife in hand, smirk frozen in surprise. Alina stepped forward, gun raised, calm as the night around them. Jack flanked left, covering her. Every operator in the room moved with silent coordination, eyes sharp, hands steady. The insurgent lunged. Alina's shot was instant, controlled. The enemy collapsed. Her brother, eyes wide, gasped, barely believing the nightmare had ended. Jack's chest heaved. The adrenaline surge was overwhelming, but so was a strange sense of awe. Alina's precision, her calm, her unwavering focus. It had saved a life that mattered more than anyone could quantify. Her brother scrambled free, pulling her into a brief, tight embrace. Jack watched, a knot of respect and unease tightening in his chest. This woman, this commander, had not only led them to victory, but had carried the weight of personal stakes without faltering. But as the team exfiltrated, moving quickly through the mountainous terrain, Jack knew the mission wasn't over. Snipers, reinforcements, and the treacherous path back to the extraction point awaited. And somewhere in the shadows, the danger was far from gone. Alina signaled, eyes scanning the horizon. "Move fast, don't stop, eyes sharp, we're not safe yet." Jack tightened his grip on his weapon. Every instinct, every skill, every lesson learned under her command would be tested to the limit before they reached safety. And deep down, he realized something he hadn't admitted before. Alina Price wasn't just a commander. She was a force that demanded respect, obedience, and courage. And the mountain, the night, the mission, all of it was a crucible designed to test them, and Jack knew that only the strongest would survive. As they disappeared into the shadows, moving toward safety, the wind carried a warning. The night was far from over. And for Jack Rourke, the lesson was clear. He had entered a storm he could never outrun, and he would have to trust Alina Price with his life. The mountains were unforgiving. Even with the night as their ally, every shadow seemed alive, every gust of wind carrying unseen threats. Jack Rourke's lungs burned as he moved alongside Commander Alina Price, guiding her brother toward the extraction point. His adrenaline still surged from the intense firefight inside the compound, but there was no time to celebrate. Danger was far from over. If anything, it had just sharpened its teeth. Alina moved with the precision of a seasoned predator, her black tactical suit blending into the darkness. Her brother, still shaken and bloodied, stumbled slightly but held firm. Jack noticed a faint tremor in her jaw, barely perceptible, the only sign of emotion as she kept her eyes scanning the ridges, checking every shadow, anticipating every ambush. "Keep moving," she whispered to her brother, voice calm but firm. "Step light, watch every foothold." Jack glanced at her, impressed and unsettled. She didn't just give orders, she instilled confidence and fear simultaneously. Every operator in the team followed instinctively, moving as one unit. Even in chaos, Alina's authority created order. The path back to the extraction point was narrow, winding along a ridge with sheer drops on either side. Jack's mind raced. One misstep could be fatal. But Alina's eyes constantly scanned ahead, catching every subtle movement, every glint of moonlight off metal that might indicate a sniper. Then it happened. A sudden flash from the tree line. A sniper's round cracked through the night air, ricocheting dangerously close to the team. Jack dove for cover instinctively, adrenaline turning his thoughts into instinctive action. Alina's voice cut through the chaos, low and precise. "Suppress, move left, cover the asset." Jack fired a controlled burst, the shot precise, taking out the exposed sniper. Behind him, Alina had already shifted, coordinating the rest of the team with subtle hand signals. The mountain had erupted into a deadly game of shadows, and every second counted. As they advanced, Jack noticed movement in the foggy valley below, more hostiles. A small squad, moving with deadly coordination, cutting off their path to the extraction point. Panic threatened to rise, but Alina's calm remained absolute. She moved like a shadow, positioning operators, assigning cover, calculating the enemy's trajectory in real time. "Rourke, flank right, cover the rear. I'll move forward with the asset," she commanded, her voice precise, leaving no room for argument. Jack pivoted, moving silently through the rocky terrain, gun ready, eyes sharp. He caught glimpses of the enemy moving like wraiths, but every movement of his own team countered theirs with efficiency that only years of elite training could achieve. Then came the worst moment. A rockslide triggered by enemy fire, sending boulders crashing down dangerously close to their path. Jack ducked, narrowly avoiding being crushed. He glanced back. Alina had shielded her brother instinctively, rolling him behind cover as she absorbed the shock of falling debris. His heart pounded. Every instinct screamed danger, yet Alina's calm focus never wavered. She wasn't just leading, she was calculating, predicting, absorbing danger for the team, for her brother. Jack felt both admiration and a creeping fear. This mission wasn't just tactical, it was personal, and every operator knew it. They reached a small ridge overlooking the extraction point. The helicopter lights were faint in the distance, flickering through the mist. Relief threatened to wash over Jack, but he kept his eyes forward. Alina's gaze never wavered. "Stay sharp," she whispered. "They know we're coming, expect resistance." Sure enough, as they descended toward the landing zone, a hail of gunfire erupted from hidden positions along the ridge. Jack dove for cover, returning fire with controlled precision. Alina moved her brother behind a boulder, scanning for threats while coordinating suppression fire with hand signals. The battle was chaotic but precise. Alpha Group's training under her leadership became apparent. Every operator moved instinctively, covering angles, coordinating fire, advancing under pressure. Jack realized that her previous tests, the obstacle courses, the drills, the relentless training, it had all led to this. She had forged a team ready to operate under absolute pressure. Jack caught a glimpse of Alina, her eyes steely, jaw set, and realized that for her, failure was not an option. This wasn't just a mission anymore, it was a crucible of personal stakes, skill, and survival. Her brother's life depended on every decision, every step, every breath. The helicopter landed with a roar, blades cutting through the night air. Jack helped Alina's brother aboard, checking straps, scanning for threats. Enemy fire intensified, pinning them momentarily in a deadly stalemate. "Move," Alina shouted. Jack and the team provided cover as the helicopter lifted, engines screaming against the mountain wind. Bullets ricocheted off rocks, sending shards of stone and debris into the night. The rotor wash tossed dust and gravel into the air, creating a chaotic storm. Jack felt the weight of the moment, exhaustion, adrenaline, fear, all merging into sharp clarity. He realized that leadership wasn't about ego or bravado. It was about presence, precision, and sacrifice. Alina had led them through chaos, fear, and near-impossible odds, and had carried a personal burden all the while. As the helicopter lifted, Jack glanced at her. For the first time, he saw vulnerability flicker across her face, brief, fleeting, but unmistakable. Her eyes softened as she watched her brother, safe but shaken, secure in the back of the aircraft. Jack exhaled, tension draining from his body, but a new realization hit him. The mission wasn't over. This was extraction, yes, but danger was everywhere. Enemy reinforcements could ambush them at any moment. The mountains, the night, and the enemy's unpredictability were far from tamed. Alina turned to Jack, voice low but firm. "Rourke, you did well tonight, but don't relax. The storm isn't over, it's only shifted." Her words, calm and measured, carried the weight of experience and unspoken warning. Jack nodded, understanding that the mission had revealed something deeper about her, about resilience, control, and the sheer force of will that defined Commander Alina Price. As the helicopter flew toward safety, Jack's mind replayed the night, the ambush, the sniper, the rockslide, and the near misses. He realized that survival depended not just on skill, but on trust. Trust in leadership, trust in each other, and perhaps most dauntingly, trust in Alina Price herself. The mountains disappeared beneath the rotors, the night air giving way to the faint glow of distant city lights. Jack knew that even though they had survived this leg of the mission, the real test was yet to come. Enemy forces were still out there. The operation had revealed vulnerabilities, both in terrain and in their own team. And for Jack, one lesson had crystallized. Commander Alina Price wasn't just a leader, she was a force of nature, unyielding, unstoppable, and utterly unpredictable. The storm had passed them, but the tempest wasn't over. The next phase of the mission, the pursuit, the cleanup, and the consequences of their actions, loomed on the horizon. And Jack Rourke, once arrogant and impulsive, now felt the weight of responsibility more acutely than ever before. Alina Price watched her brother, silent but unbroken, her mind already racing ahead to the next step. And Jack realized, with a mix of awe and fear, that following her wasn't just survival, it was learning to navigate a storm he could never outrun. The extraction seemed almost surreal as the helicopter lifted them away from the jagged Carpathian peaks. Moonlight danced off the rotor blades, illuminating fleeting glimpses of the mountains below. Jack Rourke felt the tension ease slightly, adrenaline still high but tempered by the sense of temporary safety. Alina Price sat rigid, her eyes forward, scanning instruments and distant terrain as if the mountains themselves could erupt into danger at any moment. Jack allowed himself a breath, glancing at her brother. He looked exhausted, bruised, but alive, the first glimmer of relief in what had been a night of relentless terror. For a moment, Jack imagined Alina letting herself exhale, letting the weight of fear dissipate. But he realized quickly that she couldn't. Not yet. "Stay alert," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Her voice carried the subtle edge of warning. Jack's gut tightened. That warning wasn't just a standard command. It was instinct, experience, and premonition rolled into one. Hours into the flight, the crew received an encrypted transmission. A voice crackled through the radio, cold and mechanical. "Package compromised. Extraction vector intercepted. Enemy reinforcements inbound. Adjust route immediately." Jack's stomach sank. He knew the mountains were treacherous, but intercepted intelligence was worse. It meant the enemy had anticipated their moves, a possibility he had dreaded but hoped would not come true. Alina's eyes narrowed, calculating. "Vector adjustments. Jack asked, voice tight. Change course. Emergency landing in 20 clicks. Night ops continue. We're not clear yet, Alina said. Her voice was calm but contained the steel of authority and command. There was no hesitation. Every syllable indicated she had already processed the risk, recalculated the mission, and prepared her team for the next move. Jack felt the weight of realization. Even survival wasn't guaranteed. The mountains were still a battleground, and they had no margin for error. The helicopter touched down in a narrow clearing, barely wide enough for the aircraft's skids. The trees pressed in around them, shadows long and threatening. Jack disembarked, immediately scanning the perimeter. The air was thick with mist and the faint smell of wet earth and pine. Every sound seemed amplified, the rustle of leaves, the snap of twigs, the low whine of rotor blades settling. Alina moved quickly, positioning operators to establish a perimeter. Jack helped her brother to cover, his hands steady despite the lingering adrenaline. Move fast, stay sharp, she instructed, her voice cutting through the mist. As the team advanced, Jack noticed something unusual: tracks. Fresh tracks, too large for the enemy patrols they had encountered, moving in unpredictable directions. A chill ran down his spine. Something wasn't right. Before he could voice his concern, a sudden volley of gunfire erupted from the tree line. Alpha Group dove for cover instinctively, bullets ricocheting off rocks and tree trunks. Jack returned fire, heart hammering, adrenaline pushing every reflex to its limit. Alina's voice rose above the chaos, calm yet commanding. Suppress, flank left, keep the asset covered. Jack's mind raced as he executed her commands, moving in perfect synchronization with the team. Every instinct told him this was no ordinary ambush. The enemy had adapted. They had anticipated the exfiltration, the landing, the route. Jack realized with grim certainty that they were now inside a trap. Alina moved like a shadow through the battlefield, directing operators, neutralizing threats, and keeping her brother shielded. Jack followed, awed by her precision. She wasn't just leading, she was predicting the enemy's movements, reading the battlefield like a chessboard in motion. Suddenly, a hand grenade rolled into their perimeter. Jack lunged, throwing it back instinctively, but Alina's command froze him mid-motion. Wait, cover. The explosion rocked the clearing, throwing debris and dirt into the misty night. Jack shielded his face, coughing, adrenaline spiking. When the dust settled, he saw Alina's silhouette, unflinching, already repositioning the team. Her brother was safe, crouched behind a boulder, breathing hard but alive. Jack's respect for her intensified, but so did his unease. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting against an enemy that knew their every move. Then an unexpected sound cut through the chaos. A familiar voice, calm but deadly, echoing through the mist. Price, you should have stayed home. Jack froze. The name struck a chord, something from Alina's past he had only glimpsed through rumors and whispers. A former operative, someone who had crossed paths with her in missions she rarely spoke of. The tension in the air thickened. This wasn't just an ambush, it was personal. Alina's eyes hardened, jaw set, every muscle in her body coiled like a spring. Go after him, she barked at Jack, voice low but sharp. I'll cover the asset. Take the lead and stop him before he reaches the ridge. Jack's pulse surged. He had never been given orders like this to confront someone with such lethal precision and personal history. But he trusted her implicitly. He moved, flanking left, tracking the voice through the mist and trees. Every step was calculated, silent, deadly. The figure emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, with a gun trained on the ridge. Jack raised his rifle, calculating the shot. Before he could fire, the enemy moved with uncanny speed, using the terrain to their advantage. Jack realized they weren't just skilled, they were familiar with Alina, familiar with tactics only a few could predict. A firefight erupted. Bullets flew, ricocheting off rocks, snapping branches, sending leaves into the mist. Jack moved instinctively, using cover, returning fire, coordinating silently with Alina's signals. The battle was chaotic but precise. Every move, every shot, every breath mattered. Amidst the chaos, Jack saw Alina's brother, safe behind a boulder, eyes wide but trusting her implicitly. He realized the stakes were no longer just operational. They were deeply personal, not only for Alina but for everyone involved. Then the figure hesitated, a split-second miscalculation. Jack seized the moment, firing a controlled shot that disabled the enemy without killing him. The figure collapsed behind cover, groaning. Alina emerged from the mist, moving with lethal grace. She surveyed the battlefield, eyes narrowing on the remaining threats. "Secure him," she ordered. "We're not safe until everyone is clear." Jack nodded, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He moved quickly, securing the enemy and ensuring the ridge was clear. The team regrouped, battered but alive, the weight of the battle settling over them. Alina's voice finally softened just slightly as she spoke to her brother. "You're safe now. We're getting out of here." Jack exhaled, heart still hammering, and realized something profound. Alina Price wasn't just a commander, a soldier, or a strategist. She was a force of nature, relentless, precise, and unyielding. And surviving this mission meant trusting her implicitly, no matter the cost. As the team moved toward a secondary extraction point, Jack glanced at her. For the first time, he saw vulnerability in her eyes, fleeting but unmistakable. The storm had passed them for now, but he knew the next battle, the next challenge, was inevitable. And deep down, he understood something he hadn't admitted before. To follow Alina Price was not just survival. It was to step into a storm that would test every instinct, every skill, and every ounce of courage he had. The night air pressed in around them, heavy with mist, gunpowder, and the promise of more danger. And as the team vanished into the shadowed mountains, Jack knew that the mission was far from over and the storm was only just beginning. Dawn was a pale whisper on the horizon as the team approached the secondary extraction point. Mist clung to the mountains like a living thing, curling around rocks and boulders, masking every movement and every threat. Jack Rourke's muscles ached, his lungs burned, and his mind raced through every tactical option he had learned under Commander Alina Price. But he also carried a new, deeper understanding. Survival wasn't just about skill, it was about trust, discipline, and following a leader who demanded the impossible. Alina's eyes scanned the ridge ahead, her silhouette a shadow of lethal precision against the misty dawn. Her brother followed close behind, silent, exhausted, and trembling from the previous night's ordeal. Jack could see the weight of fear and relief intermingling in the younger man's expression, and it made the stakes feel even more urgent. Every step forward was a gamble. One misstep could undo everything. The enemy, though weakened, was not defeated. Jack could feel it in the tension that hung in the air like a storm cloud. Snipers, patrols, and hidden reinforcements had surely regrouped after the previous night's chaos. Alina's instincts, honed by years of combat, seemed to sense it too. She slowed her pace, hand signals guiding Alpha Group to positions of cover behind jagged boulders and scraggly pines. "Eyes open, move carefully. Every second counts," she whispered to the team, voice steady, tone absolute. The helicopter was a distant glow, circling in low orbit, waiting to extract them once the ridge was clear. But getting there meant crossing an exposed clearing where the enemy had planted traps and ambushes. Jack felt his stomach tighten. His body was exhausted, but adrenaline pushed him forward, every nerve on high alert. Then it began, a low, deliberate rumble. Jack's eyes snapped toward the noise, and he saw it. A squad of enemy operatives advancing through the fog, moving in perfect synchronization, weapons raised. They had anticipated their path, predicting the extraction route. The ambush was real, deadly, and unavoidable. Alina didn't flinch. She moved like a shadow, coordinating the team with silent hand signals, positioning Jack to cover the left flank. Her focus was absolute. every command calculated, precise, and lethal. "Suppress, fire in pairs, asset in the center," she barked, her voice slicing through the tension. Jack obeyed instinctively, covering the advancing enemy with controlled bursts, taking out one target after another. The fog and dawn light played tricks on the eyes, creating shadows that hid movement, but Alina anticipated every tactic, directing operators to neutralize threats efficiently. Then came the most dangerous moment. The enemy detonated an improvised charge near the clearing, sending a shockwave through the ridge. Jack was thrown off balance, hitting the ground hard, his ears ringing. Dirt and gravel stung his face, and for a heartbeat, chaos threatened to consume him. Alina's hand shot out, gripping his arm, steadying him. "Move now!" Her calm, unshakable presence cut through the fear, restoring clarity. Jack scrambled to his feet, adrenaline sharp as a blade. They advanced together, weapon fire cracking behind them, the enemy desperate to prevent the extraction. Every operator was executing perfectly, responding to Alina's precise commands with instinctive accuracy. But Jack couldn't shake one thought. This mission had become a crucible, not just for skill, but for every ounce of courage and trust they possessed. Suddenly, a sniper appeared on a ridge above them, taking aim. Jack dove behind cover, heart hammering. Alina, however, moved like a phantom, tracking the sniper's position without hesitation. "Rourke, cover the asset. I'll handle him," she commanded, eyes cold and focused. Before he could argue, she sprinted across open ground with fluid, impossible precision, using rocks and shadows to mask her movement. She disappeared behind a boulder, and moments later, a single, controlled shot rang out. The sniper collapsed, neutralized without hesitation. Jack felt en mix with fear. Alina Price was not just a leader. She was a force of nature, unstoppable, precise, and lethal. The helicopter was now within sight, lights cutting through the mist, its rotors stirring the cold mountain air. Jack helped Alina's brother toward the aircraft, the younger man trembling but alive. Just as they neared the skids, another squad of enemy operatives emerged from the fog, desperate to intercept. Alina's voice cut through the chaos. "Positions, defensive line, cover the asset." Jack and the team formed a protective barrier, weapons blazing, suppressing the attackers with disciplined fire. Bullets tore through the morning mist, ricocheting off rocks, cutting down anyone who dared advance. Alina moved like a shadow, neutralizing threats with surgical precision, guiding the team, shielding her brother, commanding with the kind of calm that defied human limits. The last enemy operative made a desperate dash for the helicopter, but Jack anticipated the move. He raised his rifle and fired a precise shot, halting the threat mid-stride. Alina's eyes flicked to him, a brief nod acknowledging his skill and awareness. For the first time, Jack felt not just respect, but genuine partnership with her, the bond forged through fire, fear, and life-or-death stakes. Finally, the last threat was neutralized. The helicopter's ramp lowered, engines roaring, ready to lift them from the mountains. Alina's brother moved first, safe at last, eyes wide with disbelief and relief. Jack followed, heart pounding, and then Alina stepped aboard last, ensuring every operator and every detail of the perimeter was secure. As the aircraft lifted, the mountains receded beneath them, shrouded in mist and shadow. Jack leaned against the wall, breathing heavily, adrenaline slowly draining. He glanced at Alina. She was seated opposite him, calm, composed, but her eyes betrayed a hint of exhaustion. The storm had passed, but the weight of what they had endured lingered. "Mission complete," Jack said softly, almost in disbelief. Alina's gaze met his. "Survival isn't about completing missions, Rourke. It's about knowing your limits, trusting your team, and being ready when chaos finds you. Tonight, you proved yourself." Jack felt a swell of pride, tempered by humility. For the first time, he truly understood the depth of her authority, the precision of her mind, and the strength it took to carry not only a team, but the weight of a personal stake into battle. Her brother finally spoke, voice shaky but alive. I can't thank you enough. I thought it was over." Alina gave a faint smile, rare and fleeting. "You're safe now, that's all that matters." Jack watched her, realizing that this woman, Commander Alina Price, had not only led them to victory but had carried herself through the storm with a grace and ruthlessness that few could match. She had faced personal stakes, enemy forces, and unpredictable danger, and she had emerged unbroken, decisive, and alive. The helicopter cut through the first rays of morning light, the mountains fading behind them, and Jack knew one truth above all. Following Alina Price had changed him, not just as a soldier but as a man. He had learned the cost of pride, the weight of trust, and the necessity of discipline under fire. And for Alina, the storm had passed, but the fire within her remained unyielding, relentless, and unbreakable. Jack exhaled, adrenaline finally ebbing, and allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. He had survived the impossible, witnessed leadership at its most lethal, and come face to face with the human element behind the uniform. The mountains below were silent, the mist slowly lifting, as if paying homage to the storm that had raged across them. And in that silence, one thing was clear: the bond forged in battle, the respect earned through fire, and the trust built on life-and-death decisions would endure far beyond the mountains, the night, and the mission. Alina Price leaned back, eyes forward, a storm inside her finally quieting, if only for a moment. Jack Rourke understood now: the mission had ended, but the lessons, the respect, and the transformation would stay with him forever. And for the first time, he realized that some storms don't just pass, they forge you, leaving only those strong enough to survive standing. The storm had broken, the mission was over, and life, fragile, precious, and fierce, had prevailed.